Here is the web panel we had created, emulating that of the work with to insert a new attraction, update, or delete. To do so, we called the attraction CRUD procedure, passing the mode, and in these two cases, also the attraction identifier from the grid row in question. However, in the procedure, we were hard-coding the insertion and modification. We did this to focus on the commands in the simplest way possible. Now we want to request the data from the user instead of hard-coding it, just like the real work with does. But of course it calls the transaction so that the user can enter the desired information. When the user confirms, the operation is performed. What we're going to do then is call a web panel so the user can enter their data on the screen. And upon confirming, the data will be sent to the procedure so it can perform the operation. So we'll need to modify the parameters to receive, instead of the attraction ID, all the attraction information: name, photo, category, country, and city. To avoid dealing with individual variables, we could create an SDT. Let's call it attraction SDT to make it very clear. Since we need all the attributes from the attraction transaction, we drag it here. We can see how it creates one member for each attribute in the transaction structure with the same name. Some of them correspond to attributes in the table, such as attraction photo, for example. Of course, we can delete it if it's not relevant for the SDT. And some members correspond to inferred attributes, like category name, for example. Let's save it. So, now we have to modify the second parameter so that it is a variable of the SDT data type. We insert it. And we verify that, because we named it the same as the SDT, it has been assigned the SDT data type that we just created. Now let's assign to the record to be inserted the values included in the received SDT variable. Here, the attraction name member. For now, let's leave the photo unassigned since we removed the SDT member. And for these three attributes, these three members. With this, we will be inserting a new record into the attraction table using the values that come in the SDT. Then, for the modification, we have to locate the attraction ID according to the member of that name that comes in the SDT. And let's overwrite all the attributes according to these same SDT members. Finally, let's replace the attraction ID value for delete. Let's save. Okay, the changes are no longer hard-coded. Now we need to create a web panel so the user can enter that data. We'll name it accordingly. Let's insert a new variable in the layout. And name it the same as the SDT, so it automatically takes its data type. We select it and choose all its members to insert them in the layout. Variables in web panels are editable by default, so the user will be able to enter a value. Then, from the work with, we won't call the procedure directly anymore, but instead this web panel, passing the same information, that is, the mode and attraction identifier. Then in the web panel, we need to declare PALM rule with two parameters. The first one is the variable nMode. We insert it here because it's not present by default. And the second parameter is a variable andAttractionID, which we also insert, and which will be based on the attribute with the same name. Okay, let's start by thinking about the update and delete actions. which are the ones that require the attraction ID to be passed. When this web panel receives it, it will have to load the attractions information from the database into the SDT variable so that the user can view it on screen before updating or deleting any information. Then, in the start event or the refresh event, let's choose the latter, we should load the variable with that information. To do this, we write a for each attraction, filtering by attraction ID, the value received by parameter. And in its body, we assign each member of the SDT the value of the attributes with the same name as that record in which we are positioned with the for each. But we want to make these assignments only if the mode is not insert, that is, if it's update or delete. In that case, an attraction ID value will be provided that the user should not be allowed to modify on screen. Nor should they be able to in insert mode, where it's fine to leave it empty due to auto-numbering. So we can leave the field as read-only. Therefore, if the mode is update or delete, the refresh event will run and the fields will be loaded with the database values. The user will be able to modify the desired values to perform an update later. Or in the case of insert, where all fields will be empty, enter new values. To perform the operation, let's add a confirmation button. Let's leave the system enter event assigned. We can change the caption to confirm. And now, let's write the code. We'll call the procedure that performs the CRUD operation, passing the mode received by parameter, and the SDT variable. So we call this one. It runs, and when it finishes, control returns here. And then we write a return command to return control to the object that called this one, which is the work with. Let's review what will happen in each case. For insert, the user clicks on this button. As a result, the web panel will be called in insert mode, which means all the fields will appear empty because this code won't run in insert mode. The user will then enter the desired information in these fields and click on Confirm. When they do, this invocation to the procedure will be executed, passing the mode, which will be insert, and the variable containing the values entered by the user on screen. Here, this information will be received in this SDT variable of the same name, entered through this case, and the new record will be created with the values of the variable. On the other hand, if we press Update from the work with, we call this web panel, passing the update mode and the attraction ID of the row. The web panel, upon executing the refresh, will load the SDT variable shown on screen with the information of the attraction received by parameter. Once this is done, the user will be able to modify any editable values. And when finished, we'll press Confirm. Then, this invocation to the procedure will be executed, which performs the actual update for the attraction record, whose ID comes in the member of the same name, and overwrites these attributes. Finally, let's analyze what happens when the user clicks on Delete. The web panel will be called, receiving the delete mode and the attraction ID of the selected row. Since the if is true, all these SDT members are loaded with the values from the database attributes. The user won't change any of these values. In fact, we could disable the fields in this case. And then, when the Confirm button is clicked, the procedure will be called. So it will come here and execute the delete. Once it finishes, it returns control here. So the return command is executed, which returns control to the calling object. This will then execute the refresh. After that, the row will disappear from the grid. Let's try everything at runtime. Let's start by deleting an attraction. This one, Christ the Redeemer. When we click on Delete, we see that the information is loaded. Now we click on Confirm. Everything we described earlier has just happened. When this web panel is refreshed, the attraction no longer appears. Let's insert another one with the same information. The fields appear empty. I enter the name, but I'll intentionally make a typo because the double E there is incorrect. Here we don't have the help of the selection list that the transaction has. Still, we could use it, or even turn this field into a dynamic combo box or enable suggestions while typing. We won't explore that here. Let's enter the data we remember. For the inferred attributes, it doesn't make sense to enter them. We could have made them read-only, just like in the transaction. Let's confirm. We see that the row was added, and also that I made a mistake with the city, which should have been Rio de Janeiro, in addition to the typo in the name. So let's update it. We can see it's retrieving the information from the database, so I'll change this city ID to 1. Clearly, we won't see the new city name inferred here as the transaction does because of its own logic. Here there's no logic. These are all variable type fields. There's nothing behind them. And let's correct the double E. Upon confirming, we can now see the updated information. The difference is quite clear between using the transaction for CRUD operations, which provides selection lists for foreign keys, performs referential integrity checks in real time, automatically infers attributes, triggers rules, and enforces uniqueness, and emulating the transaction with a web panel that then performs CRUD operations through a procedure. Here there is no client-side logic nor any other logic except for what is explicitly programmed in the web panel. This example using a web panel and a procedure was created for educational purposes to quickly understand the similarities and differences with CRUD operations through a transaction in a comparative way. But clearly, it makes no sense to emulate what the transaction already does on its own and almost automatically. Updating through procedures is used for different types of scenarios, not for this one. However, we'll continue with this example in the next video to study the remaining update type using the business component.